everybody, it's Eldon. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Dad's Garage. We're gonna carry on with building the engine today for my 71 GMC. And yeah, I don't know, there's gonna be a whole lot of rocket science going on this thing, but I'm gonna put this motor together. We will talk to you a little bit about what we're doing and move on forward here. I'm kind of anxious to get this thing back on the road, so we're setting some of the other projects aside right at the moment and working on it. I got some parts that have accumulated so that I can do that. So let's flip the camera around here and get started. All right, here's where we are to this point. Got most of the short block put together. Got the rest of my pistons and rod assemblies put in there. Got that taken care of. We also put the oil pump, the timing chain, and oil pan and timing chain cover on it off the video since the last one. I've got my heads ready to go here. Picked up a nice set of aluminum valve covers off of eBay that are pretty nice. Got most of our bolts and little pieces cleaned up and painted here, ready to go back together. It's going to be like a giant model kit. Let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, took my intake manifold. This is an aluminum Edelbrock Performer manifold, and I tried cleaning it up and it just didn't clean well, so I've painted it this dark gray color, and I think it's going to look really good on the motor. But that's cleaned up and ready to go. So mostly today we are just putting these pieces back together. So I think I'm going to start with we're going to get the harmonic balancer put on it and the front pulley that goes with that. We'll start there and get some of the little parts and pieces put on. I'm waiting for a couple of pieces for the heads right now that I think they're going to come in today, but if not, this video may take a couple of days to put together, so it won't matter. But yeah, I've got parts and pieces coming, so let's get moving. Let me find my balancer. Yeah, I can't even remember where I put it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I got my balancer painted up, got the pulley painted up. Let's get him out of the shadows here. There we go. So we'll get that put in place. Go find all the right bolts for it in the collection over here. There we go, one painted harmonic balancer bolt coming right up, and these three little ones here go with it. So we'll go get, I'm gonna put this on off camera. Like I said, most of what I'm doing here is not rocket science. This is just putting this giant model kit together. There's going to be lots of better videos on how to build a motor, so mostly you're just seeing what we're going through in this process. So I'm going to get that put on there, and then we'll be back. Okay, running into a snag here. I thought I had looked this over very carefully, but apparently I didn't. So this surface right here is what your seal rides on, in your front cover. And I hate oil leaks, as most of us probably do. And this thing, if this is not perfectly smooth along there, it's going to wear out the seal real fast. And this one is not. And it's not in super bad shape. A lot of times you'll get a groove in there. Sorry, this is probably focusing on my fingers, not the part. But a lot of times you'll get a groove in there, and that the seal will have worn in it after 100,000 miles. And you can see there's some wear in here, but it's not catching my fingernail. But there's some roughness to it. And so they make a repair sleeve that you can slide over these things. And it's just, a few thousandths of an inch thick. And what it does is it gives you a smooth surface there, and then the seal can ride against that. So my local auto parts stores, I have 3 to choose from, and 2 of them said they had it, and they don't. So we're going to put that on hold till I get one here tomorrow, and we're going to move on to something else. And so I think one of the things I can do right now, I can put this oil pump mounting plate on. So I'm going to get that done, and that'll be this and these screws, and I believe this is, did I say oil pump? I meant fuel pump, sorry. This, I believe, is a new fuel pump for this one. If it's not, I've got another one sitting in a drawer that's almost brand new. Yeah. So there we go. So I'll get my fuel pump and that mounting plate. Also in a box here, there's a fuel pump drive shaft that comes off the cam. I'll have to find it and get it in place, or get it ready to go, and then I will show you that process of putting those in place. All right, did a couple of preparatory things here to get this ready to go. As I was doing it, I realized I hadn't cleaned out the bolt holes. So I've taken a tap and run into all of them now, and they were actually all pretty badly in need of being cleaned out. So we got, this is the last one. And this one actually goes into a water jacket, so most of the dirt and dust would have gone off the end of it. But the flutes on this thing were completely full of oily, cruddy, rusty stuff from cleaning out all the other holes. So it was worth it. Now we're gonna just take the air compressor and you can see how much dust is coming out of some of these. But that'll have them more ready to go here. All right, so there's one little trick here on these small block Chevys. I didn't know about this until I tore into one several years ago. I guess I hadn't really done any Chevys. That's probably why I didn't know. But the oil pump has a actuating, or not, I keep saying oil pump, sorry, fuel pump, has an actuating shaft that goes up inside of here. And there's a slot, and it where are we? There we go. So it goes up inside of there and goes over and rides on the camshaft. And the camshaft has a lobe that drives that thing, pushes it in and out. And normally that thing, when you take the bolts loose, will slide out just like that right there. And when you go to put one back in, it's hard to get it to, you got to hold the shaft up in there and get the oil pump or the fuel pump in place and try to keep it all from happening. But Chevrolet made a convenient little adaptation here. So this bolt is just a plug in most situations. So it's a short bolt that's short enough that it won't go over there and hit that fuel pump drive shaft thing. So let's go up here and not drop this down a lifter bore. And I've got myself another longer bolt, same size. And what you do is you put this in there and you shove your fuel pump shaft up in there and just run this bolt in until it snugs up against it there. And you don't need to tighten it at all, just snug it up against there and it'll hold that in place. Now that shaft won't fall out while we're finishing the assembly process. So first thing I've got to do then, I've got this block off plate or adapter plate or whatever you call it here. And it's going to go right in that position there. So sometimes there is a gasket for these, sometimes there's not. And I don't have one, so I'm going to use gasket sealer and we'll put that in place and it'll harden up, form its own gasket, and won't have to worry about it. This is not a super high tolerance area. We got to be careful about like the thickness of the gasket and stuff. So I'm going to put this in place and I'll be back. This is what it should look like when you get that plate in place. You want to leave these bolts loose, obviously, so until you get things in there and get them lined up, because you may have to move the thing around. Then I've got my new fuel pump. I put some grease on the tip of it there, so we're not going to have any problems. And I'm going to slip that down in there. And it's going to want to be held out now because it needs to be pushed in tight against that drive shaft thing. So all I got to do now is get my 2 bolts in there, get them started. We'll have to compress the fuel pump just a little bit to get a straight shot on those bolts. But I'm going to do that off camera because obviously that's a 2-handed job. Okay, there we go. Just got to snug up these 2 bottom bolts here. And they're little tiny bolts, so you remember you don't want to put a huge amount of torque on them. Again, I'm sure there are torque specs for this, but I've done this for so many years that I don't worry about it. I just do it by feel. That's not always the most brilliant thing to tell somebody, but that's the way it was done for a long time. So that's got our fuel pump installed. The only thing left to do now is we need to remove this bolt, which will release that drive shaft, actuating shaft, whatever you want to call it in there. And that'll let it move freely. Now, you're also going to have oil on the other end of that hole. So what I haven't done here, here's my new bolt. I'm going to put some gasket sealer around the end of this bolt, screw it in there and tighten it down. And I think I'm going to put a lock washer on here just for good measure too, so it doesn't come out on me. But that will finish up our fuel pump installation on this part of it. And we'll have to take a look and see what the next thing is that I'm going to be doing here. I'm actually not sure today if I've got any more parts that I can put on it yet. So essentially that's what it's going to look like when we get the fuel pump part of it done. So, all right, there we go. I will be back as soon as I probably get a harmonic balancer sleeve. Okay, boys and girls, it's a couple of days later. Finally got my sleeve and got all my other junk out of the way that I was working on. We are ready to put this sleeve now onto our harmonic balancer to cover up any of the grooves and stuff there. And like I said, this one's not super bad. I've seen a lot worse, but I got it. It was $12, $13, something like that. I'm just going to put it on there just because. It'll give me a nice, perfectly good surface for the seal to ride on. Should prevent the possibility of an oil leak there. So, a ready sleeve, or whatever you call a speedy sleeve, let's see, harmonic balancer repair sleeve is a technical term for it. Just a very thin piece of metal that goes on over the shaft of the harmonic balancer. Set it on there like that. Some people have put Loctite in there. I don't know that you need to or not, but put this little cup on it, and this is what serves to even out the force of your hammer on it. And then you just tap the thing down into place. We'll see how this goes one-handed here. Looks like it's working okay. Just work our way around the thing. Not having to put a lot of pressure on it. It's actually going down there pretty good. There we go. Got the hammering cap off of it. I've put a little bit of assembly lube around there so that it will slide into the seal. I've also got the seal lubed up on the engine itself. So we're gonna slide this thing on there. So I've got that half moon key in there. Got to get it lined up in the correct position. with our crankshaft. See if I can do this one-handed. Looks like I'm gonna have to get my rubber mallet out and pound it in there, but I'm gonna do that and come back to that point. Okay, we got her on there. Pounded the thing on till we could get the bolt where it would actually start threading in the end of the crank. Then I started using a ratchet to tighten it up, and eventually got a little tighter, so pulled out my air wrench and buzzed it on till we got that to tighten down. So now we're going to pull the nut or the bolt back off so that we can put the pulley on the front of the balancer. So, let's see. Let's get her off here. Then we can take our nice pretty new pulley. Not new pulley, but newly repaired pulley and repainted. I guess repaired's not even technically correct. Just cleaned it up and repainted it. So I have new bolts to put that in place. So we get them in there, tighten all that down, put our center bolt back in, tighten it down with the air wrench, and that will wrap up. There we have it. Got all 4 bolts snugged up good and tight. The center one here, I used to put that on with an air wrench, and you want to be careful. This particular bolt is not a giant diameter bolt on the shaft of it, so I torqued it down pretty good with a wrench, but I don't want to just lay into it and for a minute or so. I just want it to go down till it stops turning and snugs up really good, and then I'm going to be content with that. These others, I put them in, hand tightened them with a ratchet, and because it's still moving, because the crank's free, I just bumped them up with the air wrench to tighten them up to get them about right. So there are torque specs on all this stuff. Again, I use them sometimes, I don't use them sometimes. These are less critical to me than head bolts and things like that. So that's all set up, ready to go. See our timing mark right there. I may get in there and put some white paint in that, but actually I think it's going to show up pretty good just like that. Got our, what do you call it, our scale there that the timing mark will line up with, allows it to move it around. That's all cleaned up and looking good. So really the next thing that I am up against is we're going to be putting the cylinder heads back together. I've got to get the valves back in them and springs and stuff like that. So I don't want to start on that tonight. My day off's in another couple of days, and I'm going to focus on them on that day so I can get them put back together and put on. So right now, just a couple of little things. I'm going to put the thermostat back on, the thermostat housing. I got it all ready to go. So I've heard different philosophies on gasket sealer. I have at least one mechanic friend that says absolutely not, never do I use gasket sealer, because he claims it can squeeze out and get into your coolant system. In this situation, go in and plug up things like your radiator and your heater core. And you know what? That's a legitimate concern. But what I've learned, I like to use it because I don't believe in gaskets being 100% effective. And especially this manifold had quite a bit of pitting around this edge right here. Not enough that the gasket shouldn't hold it, but I just like, for safety's sake, because I don't like leaks, to put that on there and use it. So I keep it thin. I don't want it to squeeze out a lot of extra stuff either on the inside or on the outside because it looks tacky. But I've got a thin layer on there. On a thermostat, you always want to put your thermostat in this direction. So this right here is the sensor part that it's actually a metallic part that expands and contracts to move that, well, open the door on the thermostat, basically. So I am going to put that in there. Then I'll put the gasket on, and then cinch my top part down. I actually have another thought here. One of the things that I like to do, I'm going to go in here and drill a hole in this that's about a 1/16 inch or a little bigger. I like to do that because the thermostat doesn't open and allow all your air to circle and coolant to circulate, and it doesn't get air bubbles out when this thing's closed. And so in order to do that, I'm going to drill that hole that lets a little bit of pressure circulate through it and helps get the bubbles worked out sooner. Doesn't really affect too much the way the thermostat works, but I like to do that. Just save myself from getting a air bubble in there that traps and overheats a part of the engine. So I'm going to do that. We'll come back and drop it in place. There we are. Got a little hole drilled in there. Doesn't take much. Who knows? Somebody might have a really smart answer to that in the comments, but I don't care. That's how I do it. So we're going to put that thing in there like that. Set our gasket down over the top of it. Make sure it's centered on there. The other thing I do like about using gasket sealer is it's kind of a glue that helps hold the gasket in place so that it doesn't fall off while you're trying to do something. So here's my handy dandy new thermostat housing. Actually had one on the truck, but it had corroded to the point I couldn't even get the bolts out of it. So this is actually the correct one for the truck that I'm putting it back into. So we will set that down on there, get our holes lined up, get it in place, got my bolts cleaned up and painted. There you go. Yeah. I don't know that I've got the right bolts, but these are good bolts that fit. These two happen to be grade 8, I think. So I'm just going to put them on there and tighten them down. And that will have the thermostat housing where it's supposed to be. So we'll get them tightened down, and I don't know, probably the next project is going to be putting the heads back together. So that, I think, is where I'm going to wrap up right at the moment. Tighten those down, and I'll be back on my day off to put the heads together. There we go. Got second cylinder head bolted on there. We're all good and ready to go that way. And as usual, I got ahead of myself a little bit. So also come over here and gotten my water pump bolted on. Had a little bit of concern with this. So this is going in that GMC, which is a 71. And I'm trying to use the original style parts on it. So this is a water pump off of a 71 350 versus, actually, here's one off of a slightly later one. I think I'm going to say the 78, which is what I've been calling my parts motor here that I'm using. So let's see. This one would have sat on there. Just so you can see the differences. There's a huge difference in how far out they stick, and I was not aware of that. I've heard of shorty water pumps, but I thought they were a Corvette thing, and I don't know if that's what this is or if it's just something that's an early style water pump. So I went to put it on there, and I actually was hitting my timing cover. I was test fitting it without the gaskets and stuff in it, and it was rubbing on that timing cover, and I thought it was going to be too much. It didn't even look like it bolted down, but I did a little bit of fine-tuning the timing cover with a soft hammer, and when I've got the gaskets in there now and bolted down, the thing's working perfectly. And so I even can see daylight down through there, which I didn't. Anyway, so I don't know what the scoop is on that one for sure. But also then, I'm pretty sure that I've got the wrong crankshaft pulley on there. Here's my pulley for my off of the 71 for the water pump. Let's see if I can get it on there without destroying stuff. Yeah, that's close. So if you look there, I've only got one of the V-grooves that's going to line up on this one. And I think I need to get that other pulley so I have a second set of V-grooves back here to line up and make all these things work right. So I'm going to be experimenting around a little bit with that here in a little bit. And to see exactly what I've got to do, I may have to take that crank pulley off of my other engine and be able to clean it up, paint it, and replace the one I've got on there right now. If I look down here, you can see this one actually has a groove right next to the harmonic balancer, so I bet I'm going to have to do that. So that's my game plan as I'm coming in here. But the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to get my lifters and push rods and rocker arms in, get my valve covers and my intake manifold on before I start messing with that. So yeah, next thing is get my lifters in there. I'm going to just clean them up and make sure they got oil on them, put some cam lube on the bottoms of them so that they will have lots of lubrication to break in on the cam. I got to make sure that my lifter bores are oiled good so that things will slide up and down in there. And that's where I'm going next. So I'll move in that direction. Okay, we have our cylinder head back together there on the first one. Still working on that. Couple things here. So these are the valve stem seals that were originally on that. They're just little O-ring that's kind of squared edges and stuff. And I was hoping to get something better to put back on them because it's an older motor and I want to protect it from having oil getting down and sucked into the combustion chamber and burned down there. So I got online and ordered this set of spring-loaded umbrella seals, and I think they're going to work a lot better. They slide on and they grab around the valve guide right here, and then they're pinched around the valve itself with that other little spring along the top. So I've put them in there. I'm also going to give a shout out for this little tool right here. This is a valve spring compressor, one that I purchased just the other day. Where did I get it? AutoZone or O'Reilly, I don't remember. This is the package for it. That is the best valve spring compressor that I've used. Yeah, I've rented them. I've used the old C-clamp style and whatever. This one works exceptionally well because of it's spring-loaded here to hold the jaws together on the spring. That's a huge thing. And these two bottom legs of the compressor are also offset from each other to compensate for the distance or the differences on each side of the valve spring, because when that spring, the way it's coiled, you're going to ride at different spots, so it needs to grab on different levels of the spring there. So anyway, that's a good little tool. If you're going to buy a valve spring compressor, highly recommend that one. I can't remember, it was like $28 or $38 or something like that. I'm really glad I actually bought that one this time instead of renting one. So have that all together. My head gasket's in place here, so I just got to set that on and get my head bolts put in place. Okay, the head is set in place. Got the head bolts just started in the holes. I'm going to show you something here on these small block Chevys. There we go. You got 3 different lengths of bolts, and the bolts all go into the water jackets, and so they need to have some thread sealer on them in order to keep leaks from happening up through there. So our different lengths of bolts are short ones, which were all silver in this set of new bolts that I bought, but I also repainted the heads silver so that they'll stay that way. They go in the outer bolt holes here. Your next longer ones, the short ones here, go in the 2 end holes here and right here. because those are sunk down in there a little bit farther. And then all of your upper bolt holes here are your longer ones, so they go in there. Now I got to get back on my handy dandy internet search and get the torque specs for these, and I'll get them tightened down. I did find, by the way, heads up for Summit Racing, they have on their website, at least for small block Chevys, and I assume for a lot of the other ones, a complete list of torque specs for all the bolts on a motor. So I'm going to go refer to that and get my torque wrenches and stuff out and tighten the head down. There we go. One cylinder head successfully bolted in place. So obviously a couple little things here on torquing down your cylinder heads. A few things I've learned over the years. So the first thing I do is I put the bolts all in by hand, tight as I can get them. Then I take a speed wrench and I run them down until they're snug with that. Then, I'll go get my ratchet, put it on there, and I'll run them down till they snug up good and solid. And what that does is it gets everything pulled down tight onto the gasket and evenly snugged all the way across. That way you don't have one part that maybe hangs up on the locating pin in here and you end up thinking you got it torqued down, but it really wasn't. So anyway, do all that, get that snugged in place, check this gap along here to make sure it all is sitting down on the head gasket and snug. Then get out your torque wrench. And the torque spec on these bolts, according to Summit Racing's chart, was 65 foot-pounds. And so what I do is I take my torque wrench, this old school torque wrench, but I like using the thing because it's consistent and it was cheap. So I put a mark on here with a piece of tape so I can easily reference it every time, and I set that right at the 65 foot-pound mark. And then I'll go in, this time what I did, so always you want to do your bolts, tightening them in a crisscross or circular pattern, getting bigger and bigger as you go out. So I started here, came down to these two bolts, then jumped up here to these two, and down here to these two, and then back up, and just worked my way out doing that. And so the first thing I did was I tightened them all up to 50 foot-pounds. And starting in the middle, working out, that way it gets your pressure spread out over the thing so that the thing goes down evenly. So got them all run up to 50 foot-pounds, then went back and did my final torque to actually 65, using that same pattern on there. And there's another thing that I like to do, because I found that once you finish with that rotational or crisscross pattern, what happens is when you tighten these center bolts down, they torque down to their final torque. But then as you work your way out, tightening out here and torquing everything down, what happens is these get some of the pressure taken off of them. And so they're still slightly under torqued at that point. So because I then have everything down square, I will just take my torque wrench and start and run down each row of bolts and bring them all down to my 65 foot-pounds. And that's my final torque. So I did that row, then came down the row right here, and then there's a second row across the top. I get that, 2 rows across the top. And do that. Now they are all sitting at 65. The thing should be sitting on their square, and I think we are good to go. So now I just have to lather, rinse, and repeat on the other side. So I get that one on there. So that's going to be my next project, is putting that other head together and getting it put on. You know what? And then I'm going to skip showing you all the details. I'll come back to you when I've got it on and the thing's sitting up there where it's supposed to be. There we go. Got second cylinder head bolted on there. We're all good and ready to go that way. And as usual, I got ahead of myself a little bit. So also come over here and gotten my water pump bolted on. Had a little bit of concern with this. So this is going in that GMC, which is a 71. And I'm trying to use the original style parts on it. So this is a water pump off of a 71 350 versus, actually, here's one off of a slightly later one. I think I'm going to say the 78, which is what I've been calling my parts motor here that I'm using. So let's see. This one would have sat on there. Just so you can see the differences. There's a huge difference in how far out they stick, and I was not aware of that. I've heard of shorty water pumps, but I thought they were a Corvette thing, and I don't know if that's what this is or if it's just something that's an early style water pump. So went to put it on there, and I actually was hitting my timing cover. I was test fitting it without the gaskets and stuff in it, and it was rubbing on that timing cover, and I thought it was going to be too much. It didn't even look like it bolt down, but I did a little bit of fine tuning the timing cover with a soft hammer, and when I've got the gaskets in there now and bolted down, the thing's working perfectly. And so I even can see daylight down through there, which I didn't. Anyway, so I don't know what the scoop is on that one for sure. But also then, I'm pretty sure that I've got the wrong crankshaft pulley on there. Here's my pulley for my off of the 71 for the water pump. Let's see if I can get it on there without destroying stuff. Yeah, it's close. So if you look there, I've only got one of the V-grooves that's going to line up on this one. And I think I need to get that other pulley, so I have a second set of V-grooves back here to line up and make all these things work right. So I'm going to be experimenting around a little bit with that here in a little bit. And to see exactly what I've got to do, I may have to take that crank pulley off of my other engine and be able to clean it up, paint it, and replace the one I've got on there right now. If I look down here, you can see this one actually has a groove right next to the harmonic balancer, so I bet I'm going to have to do that. So that's my game plan as I'm coming in here. But the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to get my lifters and push rods and rocker arms in, get my valve covers and my intake manifold on before I start messing with that. So yeah, next thing is get my lifters in there. I'm going to just clean them up and make sure they got oil on them, put some cam lube on the bottoms of them so that they will have lots of lubrication to break in on the cam. I got to make sure that my lifter bores are oiled good so that things will slide up and down in there. And that's where I'm going next. So I'll move in that direction. So here we go. We're going to wrap up this video. As you can see, we're a little bit farther along than what I had intended to show you. That is due to technical difficulties. My camera on my phone's been having problems, and so I'm just going to wrap this video up here. I'll lead you to one more thing. As you can see, I've got it pretty well put together. I still have several things I'm going to do, but the one thing I did want to show you was how to adjust the valve lash on these things after you've got them back together. And I started in to do that on the video, and then the phone shut off on me. So this is all assembled back together, adjusted correctly. What I'm going to do, there's actually an extremely good video on YouTube right here. Hydraulic valve adjustment made easy / your engine guy from Ellison's Machine Shop YouTube channel. Go watch that video, and he takes all the mystery out of doing this and actually shows you how to do it, so you don't have to worry about what cylinder's on top dead center and all of that kind of jazz that a lot of the others are telling you to do. And what he says makes total sense. And so that's what I've done here and followed that. We're going to finish bolting this back together, and then we'll be ready to pull the old one out of the truck and get this one stabbed back in there. So that's where I'm going to wrap up this video for now. Sorry about the technical problems here, but hey, I'm a car guy. I'm not a computer and tech guy. So that's where we're going to wrap it up, and hope you've kind of enjoyed it, maybe learned a couple things, and we will be back with the next series of videos. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye.